Welcome to Mindly Way, where we explore life philosophies to grow and find the right path. Get ready to listen for an inner journey. The fabled Chinese hermit Chu Yu once observed a mole sipping water from a pond. Then it dawned on him that the mole just drinks as much as it needs when it's thirsty, neither more nor less. The mole doesn't burden itself with excesses because doing so would just make it more difficult for it to move. In contrast to humans, who frequently have a tendency to consume far more than they actually require. While we might not consume excessive amounts of water, we frequently overindulge in material goods, purchasing far more than what is necessary for our survival. There is a cost to consumerism as well because it takes resources to stay up with other consumers. Because of this, a lot of people are prepared to labor themselves into an early grave in order to merely amass extensions of themselves, that is, extensions of their egos. They often believe that I have more, so I am more. So as their possessions expand, so does their sense of self. However, there is a movement known as minimalism that opposes the consumerist culture in which we currently reside. Individuals who choose to live with nothing more than what is essential and reject excessive consumerism are known as minimalists. In addition to being a popular lifestyle trend today, minimalism is a notion that has been used for ages. Numerous sages and philosophers have felt a sense of liberation from having little and living simply throughout history. They realized that our identity is not defined by our belongings and that our constant quest of material goods keeps us from living life to the fullest. This movie looks at the philosophical aspects of minimalism, examining why less is more and more is less, as well as why wealth is the capacity to let go. Mistaken minimalism. Diverse interpretations exist for minimalism. Essentially, it emphasizes simplifying our life, cutting back on unnecessary things, and not pushing ourselves too far. Put another way, to make things easy. However, there are certain minimalist approaches that fall short. There is extreme asceticism first, which aims to live below the bare minimum. For instance, Prince Siddhartha Gautama was an ascetic who consumed just 1 grain of rice per day and had almost no flesh remaining on his bones. Consuming less than one needs is somewhat minimalistic, since it rarely necessitates consumption. Such a lifestyle also entails giving up material belongings, which results in a modest existence. However, less really is more in the case of the severe ascetic, because excess is a path towards self-destruction. Siddhartha Gautama came to the conclusion that physical punishment is ineffective for achieving enlightenment. Therefore, he gave up his austere way of life before becoming the Buddha. Secondly, there is an affluent, stylish version of minimalism that emphasizes getting rid of extraneous and frequently cheap items while keeping a few high-end pieces. For instance, a $2 million apartment with a simple living room. Here, minimalism is still employed to flaunt wealth since the lack of inexpensive, outdated items highlights the pricey items we do own. Since status and belongings are still important, we can view this as a sophisticated sort of consumerism because it still requires a large income to start and maintain this way of life. Such a position undermines the real benefit of minimalist living, which is that it allows us to achieve our basic pleasure, or contentment, without the weight of extreme riches or prestige and with the least number of resources possible. However, given that the prevailing consumerist culture in which we live holds that more is more and less is less, this thought is challenging to accept. This is entirely related to the way that we as a society value social rank, and the things one has, drives, lives in, owns furniture of, and dresses in determine one's social standing rather than virtue or spirituality. Our status in the ladder of power appears to be determined by what we possess. Hence, individuals who dare to reject these sacred elements will be viewed as heretics in a culture where holiness is riches, the church is the mall, and prayer is consumption. However, there are times when the benefits of life just far exceed the drawbacks. The pleasures of not being Emperor Yao respected the reclusive Xu Yu so highly that he was prepared to cede his crown to him. But Xu Yu, who led a solitary and peaceful life by the river, declined, telling the emperor that he didn't need everything under heaven and that the tailor bird uses no more than one branch when she builds her nest in the deep wood. An old Chinese book credited to the Taoist philosopher Zhuangzi contains the tale of Xu Yu. A vast empire under his leadership is something that many can only dream of, and it is given to the poor recluse. However, the narrative informs us that he made the decision to live alone as a hermit. Xu Yu have probably come to the realization that tremendous power carries with it immense responsibility and that he cannot lead a tranquil, easy life as the ruler of an empire. You may lose less and have less to worry about the less you own. In the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu penned the following line, which I will quote: "If you overvalue possessions, people will start stealing. Keep your treasures hidden to avoid making people jealous." Close quotation. Having a large collection of belongings calls for sufficient security. For this reason, we observe that ostensibly wealthy individuals frequently hide behind walls in gated communities, living in terror. On the other hand, we save a great deal of time and energy by possessing little. Our valuable possessions don't need to be maintained, and they also don't divert our attention. Furthermore, since we don't have to possess the things we want, we can still find happiness in the world. When we can take a stroll through the woods, why do we need a 1,000-square-foot garden? Why do we need a 6-bedroom mansion when we may live in a modest little home and spend no money exploring the outdoors? Henry David Thoreau, the American transcendentalist philosopher, must have also considered this before deciding to move into a cabin in the woods next to the Walden Pond. Thoreau made a conscious decision to live a humble life because he thought it could promote spiritual development. To put it simply, living simply promotes serenity. Low living expenses free us from working like dogs and allow us to spend more time indulging in the wonderful things in our environment. Isn't that the main purpose of freedom? Identifying our requirements. What then do we actually need? Where is the ideal route that a minimalist seeks to find that strikes a balance between materialism and austerity? Numerous philosophers throughout history have contributed to the development of the minimalist lifestyle in their own special ways. Consider Diogenes the Cynic, who was penniless and lived in a barrel. According to the narrative, he had a drinking cup for a time. One day, he noticed a toddler drinking from his hands, so he tossed it aside and said, "A child has beaten me in plainness of living." Apart from that, Diogenes was shameless and indifferent to the opinions of others. He was untouchable because of his disassociation from material possessions and the opinions of others. Nobody could ever harm him. However, there is a more workable method of minimalist living that was developed by the philosopher Epicurus for individuals who would prefer to live a more integrated existence without becoming an outcast. This method is for those who don't want to live in a barrel on the streets. Epicurus developed a hierarchy of requirements that helps us distinguish between the kinds of desires we should and shouldn't pursue. The things we should prioritize include basic needs and natural desires like food, shelter, and interpersonal relationships. These innate wants are also satiable since they have inherent boundaries and are typically simple to satisfy. He referred to the aspirations that we ought to shun as vain and empty, and they include fame, fortune, and power. He believed that because these wants have no natural limit, they are useless, abnormal, and impossible to satisfy. Epicurus now exhorts us to quit dwelling on our shortcomings and to appreciate what we already have. Alternatively, as he put it, remember that what you have now was once among the things you only hoped for. Do not spoil what you have by desiring what you have not. True prosperity comes from letting go. Possessing little brings immense happiness. Unlike the lives of people who aim to consume indefinitely, sacrificing everything in order to feel better about themselves and feel accepted in a society where our value is determined by the possessions we own. This is the epitome of an unhappy existence for a minimalist, giving up on traditional notions of wealth and position. Minimalism recognizes that real wealth is internal and that social status is not only a needless luxury but also a difficult to achieve, easily lost, and, for the most part, uncontrollable factor. Rather, minimalists opt for a simple, easy existence because they understand that genuine richness is found in being able to let go of all these material possessions and in experiencing the delight of living simply. They consider simplicity to be the height of sophistication. To keep oneself on this globe is not a hardship but rather a hobby if we live simply and sensibly, as Thoreau said, both by faith and experience.